You have millions of subscribers, billions of views, yet your comment section is off, and you also don't take brand deals. How would you go about creating a product for that kind of creator? In today's video, I'm taking a stab at a product launch strategy that will hopefully inform some of the ideas for you if you're considering launching your own product, and also if the style of your channel does not allow necessarily in-your-face advertising and promotion of your own products. Let's talk some product strategy. First and foremost, I don't know if you're familiar, but these are the Outdoor Boys. This is probably one of my discoveries at the end of last year. One of the channels I really enjoy watching. The whole content is about kind of like camping, survival, fishing, hunting, that kind of like outdoorsy lifestyle all over the world, but primarily in Alaska. And you can see the channel is itself pretty big, right? We're talking about 13 plus subscribers, 13 plus million of subscribers. And then each video easily clears at least 5 million views, with some of the videos, if we go by popular, crossed into the 60s, right? 40s millions of views. So very popular channel, very easy to watch, very easy family watching. I think it travels pretty well. If you're into outdoorsy kind of like lifestyle, it travels well, whether you're in Europe, somewhere in Asia, somewhere in the Americas, right? And so it got me thinking, because of the fact that they produce content that is kids friendly. They kind of got hit with this whole like deactivation of the comment section back in the day for any kind of like kid facing content. But even today, they kept their comment section off. They do have Instagram and Facebook pages, but they're not like crazy active. They do post there quite regularly, especially when it comes time to promote the next video that's coming up. So there is something out there. But the challenge is, if they would decide to go and launch a product, in the style of content that they create, they don't do brand deals, so all the viewers are not used to seeing Luke, who is kind of like the father of the family and the main star of the channel, so to speak. They're not used to him sitting there in the middle of, say, foraging, or in the middle of building a shelter for a very cold night in Alaska and saying, and by the way, today's video is sponsored by VPN. That's not something very natural to them. So you kind of have to skip that kind of presentation. And so you also don't necessarily have them promoting or co-promoting any other products in the videos. It's very much, if something is discussed, it's discussed because it's used in the video. So I figured one of the more natural products for them to offer is some sort of survival gear, right? If you go and like you Google, there's a bunch of different things. I don't necessarily think that we should go and like launch all of it at the same time. But even if you look at some package like this, like a knife or some sort of like, spork, or maybe the kit itself can be a very interesting as kind of like a foundation for the product, and they just pick a couple of SKUs and they eventually fill them out. But that's the idea. Pick some sort of like a survival kit, something that's very portable, very easy to kind of like transfer on your trips between different parts of the world, and also something you can take on a camping trip where you only really have a backpack as a spare space, and you have to fit the tent and you have to fit all the food supplies and all the other things, right? So this is the idea for the product. And this also fits very well with something I've discussed in the past when I talk about just product launch strategies in general, right? You always, as a creator, have to consider, what is the job that the viewer hired you to do? In this case, it's usually around entertainment, but also around learning the skills to survive in the wilderness or how to camp in the wilderness. So any kind of like product that the Outdoor Boys would create have to fit the same value. So if people come there to learn and get better at those things, the product that the Outdoor Boys promote should also support exactly that kind of like outdoorsy lifestyle and how to survive and how to camp and how to do all those things. So without further ado, let's talk specifics and those 10 steps that I have in mind. Very straightforward. The first step is, I think it's all about the tease and the test, because as a creator who have not done brand deals, who have not done this kind of promotions, it's important for the Outdoor Boys to really take their time with trying to launch something. So I think in the moment where in the background they might be prototyping or coming up with a different product, say for the sake of benefit for the entire rest of the presentation, let's make it some sort of a knife, right? And the way they would go about it is they would take one of those knives, and I think Luke should just need to start using it. There should be no branding on the knife. There should not be any kind of like markings to identify it very specifically. If say it's a prototype and he got one of the first prototypes, take it with you essentially to one of those trips as you make the video and start using it. I wouldn't make a big focus on it. I would like linger the shots here and there and say it's going to be some specific knife that also have some sort of like, I don't know, gear in the handle, right? Like some sort of like tools. It needs to be interesting enough that it's not going to be something that already other companies are making, right? And that's one of those reasons why you would want to launch a product as a creator. And so it also needs to be interesting enough so that visually, when someone sees, like, all of a sudden you open the handle and you take something out of it, oh my God, what is this? Like, I've never seen something like this, right? And so this is a tease and a test mode. And the response step is important because now you want to use, in this case, if say your comment section is still off, you want to start looking at your Instagram, at your Facebook, and start seeing if people are asking the question, right? This is the moment of truth. If you hit the mark, you will see a lot of questions now from your audience, especially if your channel of this size. But just in general, if say the percentage of people who ask any questions about the gear in your videos, 10%, 5%, right? And all the other comments usually comment about something else. And all of a sudden, after you tease this, it's like every other comment is asking you about that gear. It's a good indicator that you probably hit the mark and this is a product that your audience might be interested in. So this is what you're aiming for. You want to see that kind of response. If you have not seen that response, maybe the product that you selected was not the right one, which is good news. Then go back to the drawing board, pick a different idea or SKU that you had in mind, use it in the next video, and keep kind of like repeating this first two steps. And then you hit the mark and you know, okay, it seems like the response is there. The audience is really interested in this product. The reason why we do it so carefully is that because you're not promoting directly to them, in the past, you have not done that, trying to go and immediately start promoting a new product might rub your audience the wrong way, might break kind of like this atmosphere that you've created on the channel. So that's why I think it should be very much cautious. It should be teased. And then as the response flow in, you want to use that response and the wave of that interest as a kind of like justification on why you're going to go further with the product launch rather than you trying to shove it down their necks, so to speak. And so from there, you're going to start thinking, okay, I have something there. Let's do an open test of that, like TAM, right? So essentially a total addressable market, to see how many people are actually interested in. And so at this stage, you can go about it a couple of ways, but primarily the whole idea is in the next video to say, okay, you guys clearly was super interested in this tool. Okay, open secret, I actually am developing this. This is something that I'm working on. It's no other company, unless there is another company. Then you mentioned that, hey, I'm working in a partnership with Ridge, and this is a new cool tool that we're designing. I wasn't sure if that's going to be the right thing because I've never promoted it for you guys, but here it is. Since you've been so interested in it, I want to talk a little bit more about it. Now, you could just do that and then watch for the response and watch and hopefully see comments in the future or like some social media posts or DMs that you're going to receive like, oh my God, like I need this. When are you going to sell it? When are you going to sell it? Like if you see the wave of response coming in, you can start identifying and seeing like, okay, how many people are out there really interested about it? Another way, if you want to get very specific with the total addressable market, this might be the first time where you actually say, hey, there's this landing page. This is going to be a dedicated brand. Input your email for the future announcement of the product launch and see how many emails trickle in and how big of an audience potentially interested in purchasing that product, right? You could even tease and say, listen, this is something that usually whatever other companies sell at like $100. We're really trying to keep the quality at the top notch, but keep it under $100, right? Like tease the pricing as well, because sometimes the interest might be indicative of the people's own perception, what they think they're willing to pay for the product, and their perception might be $20. So you might generate an email list of 10,000 people, but 8,000 of them actually thought that it's going to be $20 product, right? So you don't want to leave that assumption, in my opinion, on the table. You want to give them at least early indicator of what the price will be like, especially because it's your first launch, right? If you're someone who've launched products before, people probably know that, hey, the product of this type, TohirT would launch at like $200. So they already kind of like have a better understanding. This is your first product launch. You really want to make sure you tease a little bit the potential target price that you're aiming for and make it real, right? Like don't make it the one that your production company will be like, we'll never be able to meet it. No, after you had those conversations with production company, you've done some samples, you should have a rough idea of what that product pricing might look like, right? So this is kind of like the important step where you start thinking, okay, here it is. We're openly testing it. What do you guys think? And start looking at potential volume of orders, right? And that should also inform how many you actually stock, how much money you spend up front to go and generate that actual physical product so that they start getting it ready in the warehouse for the shipment. And that's where, assuming all those things go well, you got the positive response, email subscriptions were like crazy, and you got enough of people out there to say, hey, I think I can justifiably sell X number of this product, assuming the same interest, launch the SKU. So at this point, you essentially go to the market, you launch the SKU. Again, you can do it a couple of ways. If you have that newsletter, kind of like a subscription window on your landing page, blast that audience, right? Hey, the product is launching. Make sure you have dedicated social media page for that brand. And we'll talk a little bit about in the future why it's important, but make sure there's a social media page where people can go to, and obviously in the description of your videos, especially those initial videos where you start teasing it, I would go in place and say, hey, update, we're actually launching this product and here's the link. And so you would go through launch and you just make sure, again, everything goes nice and smoothly, people know where to go and how to order it. And if you have a video, again, don't have to make a dedicated video. If you have an upcoming video just to happen to coincide with the launch, I would go and put it there as well, right? Like it all depends on how big of a blast you want to make. But again, because you don't usually actively promote this kind of things, I would try to go softer approach first, and then gradually start mentioning it more and more, right? So at that point, you launch the product, and the next step is all about the support. So like this is very important, I think, moment for me, for a lot of brands. They kind of just go and focus on like, hey, we launched a product, we did it. No, actually do a proper job for the next coming weeks and ensure products are out, they're delivered on time. Start watching your support email for any kind of like support inquiries. If something is broken, I would replace it for free, or who knows, if SKU is inexpensive enough for you to produce, I would even send them the new SKU. Just make sure they feel like, oh my God, this is the most amazing product. And if something goes wrong, this is the most amazing brand I'm working with, because they're going to take care of me and then they're going to ensure that I have positive experience. Like this is very crucial. I think here we are establishing an independent brand. We're not talking about you going and doing a one-off, right? We're in this vein talking about establishing a dedicated brand for you as a creator. So you want to make sure that initial impression that all those buyers have is the best possible. You'll create such a great word of mouth around your brand that in a little bit we'll start talking about, but it will allow you to promote it outside of just you being the only person who plugs it in your videos. So important step, just make sure they have the best experience possible. And now you're ready to do the double test. So for this step 6, essentially what I think you do as someone like Outdoor Boys, you now bring the next 2 SKUs, potential SKUs that you're thinking about, right? Because you're likely going to have a lineup of at least like 10 different ideas. So bring the next 2 and start testing them side by side. Show them like, hey guys, thank you for the amazing response. It looks like all of you love the product. Clearly there's something interesting and there's more things I want to innovate, because the incumbent existing companies, they don't do well with these 2 products. So this is something I'm thinking about, and we're going to be using it in the next couple of videos. And start using it, right? So start using it in the videos, and essentially, again, similarly to the first and second step, start watching for the response. The important part here is that I would actually create a call to action, and I would maybe create some sort of like a vote on the website or somewhere in the social, and start getting an input from your audience on which product they would want to prefer. This is important because you will start engaging them beyond just like pushing the marketing onto them, or again, demonstrating it casually in your videos. You will start getting them more engaged in the process of actually prototyping and developing your product. Their feedback is important. Show them that their feedback is important, and offer, as I said, maybe someone provide the link on the website. Someone there is a way to vote for which prototype they would prefer, and an email subscription window to tell them like, hey, input your email here to be notified when we're ready to launch one of these prototypes. So again, I think you're going to create a very engaged audience, and you're going to also create a discussion around that. And then you're ready to launch the second SKU. There are a lot of decisions going to happen in the background, right? You might launch a very popular one if it's like, earth and sky difference. But if they're pretty close, just pick the one that you think makes the most sense, and go and launch it. Right, at this point, you essentially launch the second SKU, again, go through the same motions. Folks on the newsletter who subscribed for notifications get it. Maybe use it in one dedicated video, so maybe you don't. Like, there's this whole strategy is built around the fact that you're not up in their faces about it, which means you might not sell out immediately, but that's fine. Let it be a gradual flow. Assuming you financially can support it and you have the infrastructure, which we're going to also mention at the end, you can kind of like go through this process without rushing it too much. And so you're going to launch the second SKU. And at that point, you essentially, again, go through the standard process of delivering support, make sure you watch out for what's going on. And for the next step, you prepare and launch the third SKU. And so here now you start creating this like tempo. There's a certain rhythm to how you go about your business, where you launch the SKU, you provide the support, you start teasing and preparing for the second SKU. Now that you already had the design and you tested, and assuming that third SKU was as good and you decided it's worth launching, you can just continue and kind of like go into the mode of launching the third SKU. By then, we're probably talking a month or two since launch of the second SKU, so you can kind of like go and put it in one of the videos, show like, hey, the response was great, there was some feedback, there were some things we worked on, here's what updated, and we're launching this third SKU. And at that point, the big thing that I want to see in the switch is, I'm sorry, I switch way too fast, but essentially now you start thinking about the brand marketing and socials, right? You now have established page. There are now 3 SKUs on that page, right? So it's a website, it's a brand. Start thinking about its own dedicated socials, which you hopefully you already had since the first launch, but now it should become its own kind of like small ecosystem, right? So you have maybe your Instagram page, your Facebook page, or whatever other maybe applicable, right? Social media channel, if maybe it's more visual makeup, maybe it's Pinterest. But now you have basically your socials, you have your website, and notice how in all of my steps before, I kept saying send them to that page, send them to that page, send them to that page, because you want to create an environment where they're used to going to that website. They're used to being like, hey, if I want one of these products, if I want to really kind of like go after this new innovative XYZ product in my industry, I don't always have to wait on my creator to drop a video. There's this website out there. And I would even go as far as allocate some of the budget, because hopefully by now you have a little bit of the budget, you have some money in the war chest from the sales of the first 3 SKUs. Start doing some independent social media marketing, right? You will have information from your, say, Instagram page as a creative of your audience. You will know it from your YouTube demographics data, TikTok, you'll know some data in there. And so now you'll also have some visibility from the stats on your website, from the newsletter subscriptions, or the folks who kind of like offer their email to be notified. You will have roughly the idea of the audience that you're actually targeting. And I would use it to plug it into the social media brands and social media like brand campaigns, and start sending it out independently. It can still use obviously your image and likeness because it's your brand, but it's now done outside of your content. It kind of like starts to live on its own. And the reason why I think it's important, because at that point, what you build towards the 10th step of full independent operation, right? You can still use the same products in your videos, but the good news is because you kept funneling folks to that website and assuming the product is good. And the reason why I was so focused on the support, there is a dedicated perception of that brand's value, right? Outside of just you. And the reason why I also was saying it's important to create that word of mouth is because through the word of mouth now, there might be some people who never watch your content, but because their friends were your fans and they watched their stuff, they decided, hey, I actually really like the product, so I'm going to go pick up the product. And you create this whole other subsection of like your product buyers who've never watched your content, who are not really familiar with your brand, but they're familiar with the brand that you build over here around this specific SKU. So in case of Outdoor Boys, it's all this survival gear. And that's it. At that point, essentially, I think you ensure you kind of like send it into independent operations, still use it in your videos, but don't actively promote, which allows you to, again, maintain kind of like the values that you had before, where you didn't have to go and constantly plug products and you never did brand deals. People feel a lot better about this flow, specifically for like the Outdoor Boys, because of the fact that none of this ever existed and they never really teased the products unless they were interesting, and they just got them from somewhere else. Maybe it was a knife that they bought in Japan, or some knife that they bought from the natives of Alaskan. You can continue using it the same way. Like, hey, there's this interesting tool, here's how I'm using. Somewhere on the tool you can see the logo of the company, so people can kind of like infer and figure out. And somewhere in the description you also have a couple of links to the website, but you're not actively promoting it, you're not in your face, and you're not breaking the immersion that you've created in your content. And yeah, at this point, you went through this 10-step process, you launched a couple of products, and you're kind of like off to the races when it comes to managing this business. I know it's easy to describe, and that's the important disclaimer, right? Like, I ignored a few things. I ignored the actual product development. I ignored the fact that it will take money to go there. I ignored the fact that, to again, as you start thinking fulfillment, it's either you're partnering with someone or you're hiring someone, and you accept the stock and you check the stock and you have to sell it. There's customer support. There's a lot of other details within each step to make sure operationally they're supported. They're also, I'm ignoring the steps around, if you start promoting and running social media campaigns, you're not going to be running, so you're going to have to hire a marketing team or some maybe partner with an agency that will help you. Essentially, I kind of like sidestepped a lot of the operational questions, but primarily because if you have the strategy in place, which usually like the big sticking point, right? For creator who especially have never done this before, like outdoor boys, I'm helping overcome that sticky point and show that, hey, you can still launch and go about it in a very natural to your content way. And once you go about it, and if this sounds like interesting, say if I'm talking to Luke and this is my proposal to him, that's how it starts. But then as we kind of like go deeper and deeper, that's when I would go and start thinking about, okay, now let's break down into very specific details what it's gonna take at each and every step, and what's our budget, how much are we comfortable investing, because this is what it takes. Part of the point of this video is also to describe that there are ways to go about this strategy, but it also takes a lot to actually take a concept of a product, especially a physical product, from the idea to an actual launch. And it's usually a good, probably a year for the first launch. Honestly, from all my experiences from launching a few products, like my wife has her own brand, right? Like they're actually some of her products over here behind me. It takes a lot. Second, third product, you usually have vendors that you're working with, you know how to design, you know how to kind of like go about it, you know how to develop packaging. Like second and third SKUs will be much faster in this plan. That first SKU, from the moment you ideate it to the moment you actually start teasing the prototype, is probably a good 6 months, like 3 to 6 months. And then it's another like few months until the prototype is final. You know the cost, you know how much you want to order, right? You go through the teas and tests and all those things, and then you launch. But then from then on out, the second and third SKU usually somewhere in the stages of development. Early on, there's some prototypes, right, that you're using, and so you can go a little bit faster. Maybe you make sure all the SKUs kind of like about the same size, so you can reuse the same boxes, so you don't have to buy new boxes, so you know how much it's going to cost you to ship. There's a lot. So from me to you as a creator, if you're considering launching a physical product, there are multiple ways you can go about it, exciting ways you can go about it. Keep it natural to your content, but it is a lot of work. So you really need to love it to go into that kind of stuff. So if you're curious, again, I love talking about that stuff. I do it for free. So like feel free to just reach out if you have an idea about the product. I can kind of like help you, give you the framework on how to break it down. And for outdoor boys, I'm very curious. I actually would want them to launch something like this because again, I have plenty of different silly things here, but like gear, knives, that stuff I like. And so it's my personal, I'm like putting it out into the universe, my wishful thinking, like, hey, there's a way to launch it. Let's go about it because I want to have one. So yeah, it's an interesting thought process, an interesting idea. I've done something similar before for Mark Robert and Crunch Labs, where I was thinking how Crunch Labs would evolve and what's their next stage would look like. And I'm definitely enjoying this kind of like brain teasers of picking a YouTube channel and trying to figure out how to launch a product for them, digital or physical. Last couple of times I did physical, maybe next time I'll do digital product. So let me know in the comment section below if you have like a favorite creator who've never launched anything and you want to put it out in the universe. I'll go and think about the strategy and break it down. And who knows, maybe you'll send that strategy to that creator and it'll inspire them to go and launch it. They don't even need to get me involved as long as, you get what you want. For me, it's just a lot of fun to create this kind of content. And I'll see you next Saturday. Peace.